All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. We're going to go around the horn, talk a lot about the football weekend. Before we do that, let's jump into some Texas basketball. Texas basketball 5-0, which is not unprecedented for Texas basketball team, but they've looked really good. Their closest win has been 15 points, and they've blown a lot of people out so far, including a really highly rated Gonzaga team. I know Gonzaga's had some struggles since then, but still a dangerous team, still impressive for Chris Beard's Texas Longhorns. Right now, the backcourt is really the difference in this team. Something that Texas has really struggled for a while now is to have that backcourt. And they've got 5 guys right now that are contributing a lot to this team in the backcourt. Not only are they making lots of shots, but they're giving the ball up. They're completely pesky on defense, really rough on opposing offenses. They've got a chance to prove it again that they're a good team. They got a Thursday matchup with Creighton. I think obviously both teams will be in the top 10. Texas will probably be ranked 2. Creighton anywhere from 7, 8, and 9, I would imagine. It just kind of depends on where some of those teams that lost over the weekend sit down. But yeah, Longhorn basketball looking good right now. Chris Beard's got them in good shape. Let's see if they can keep it going throughout the season. All right, this is my favorite segment so far this year, is Who's on Upset Alert. I started doing it a couple weeks ago, and I don't know how, but I'm pretty decent at it. I've never been below 500 on these, so let's talk about who I thought was on Upset Alert last weekend, college football. Clemson Tigers. They were on Upset Alert, and they got upset. South Carolina did exactly what I thought they could do. They rode the momentum from that big win over Tennessee, and they went into Clemson and got a victory. Ole Miss, you guys were on Upset Alert for the second week in a row, and for the second week in a row, you lost. I don't feel great about calling that, but I called it. Here's where I fell off this week. I had Bama and USC on Upset Alert. Bama really took care of business against just a sort of a overmatched Auburn team. Auburn still, they got some talent there at Auburn. They just, I don't know. They look like they just struggled to be consistent. And obviously that'll put you behind a team like Bama that's usually at least somewhat consistent. And I think Bama has been consistent this year. They just have been consistently not as good as they have been in the past. And then USC missed on this one as well. I thought Notre Dame would be able to do more offensively. I knew USC would score points. I just felt like Notre Dame would be able to sort of match those points with them. So 2 for 4 over the weekend on upset alerts. I think last week I went 2 for 4 as well. First weekend I did it, I was 2-0. I like doing upset alert picks. Sucks that the season's coming to an end, right? All right, some notables over the weekend. A&M looked really impressive in a win against LSU. I mean, LSU was ranked 5th. You can argue whether they should have been ranked 5th or not. I personally don't think LSU should have been ranked 5th. I don't know how you put a 2-loss LSU team over a 1-loss USC team. I know the Pac-12 is not good, but USC has been pretty impressive most of the year. Regardless, I've been dogging A&M a lot this year, and their season has been pretty terrible. And they did rush the field for winning their 5th game. But man, that was impressive. They put it on LSU. I think if you're an A&M fan, that's the kind of game that's the most frustrating game. Even though it was a great win and a big win for, big win for the moment, right? It means nothing for their season. But that's the type of game A&M fans, I think, expected mostly all season. They played a pretty good game against Bama, ended up coming up short, but they really dominated LSU. Texas Tech beats OU over in Jones Stadium in Lubbock. That game was a lot like the Texas game. OU got a big lead, and then Tech just kind of kept fighting back and got it into overtime. And then mistake. OU kicker misses a pretty routine field goal. Tech cashed in. I think it's the first time Tech has ever beat OU and Texas in the same year. It's pretty meaningless at this point. I mean, it's not like if they would have done that in 2005, 2008, I think that means a lot more. I don't know that beating 6-6 OU and 8-4 Texas in the same season without their starting quarterback, is really that big a deal. But they did it. I think again, I've talked about Coach McGuire. I think he's one of those guys. I don't know about his game day decision making and all, maybe his preparation. The guys love him. He's one of those rah guys. It'll be interesting to see what Tech can do to kind of build on that. I think Tech's always going to be second fiddle at best in Texas from a recruiting perspective, but they always play tough, and it's a tough place to play. So they've always got sort of that advantage. And I think under Coach McGuire, they'll just continue to play tougher and tougher. TCU absolutely destroyed ISU. I think it was last week, about Matt Campbell just not being a good coach. And man, I think the year before, they were the favorite, I think, kind of going into the Big 12. They were certainly one of the teams that everybody thought was going to be in the Big 12 championship game last year. And even with all that experience and all that talent, they just couldn't do it. And so this year he's kind of has sticks from a talent perspective and experience perspective. And man, has it shown just a really rough season for Iowa State and Matt Campbell. And then that kind of loss, that's rough. TCU looked really good. Kind of the first game to me where they've really put it all together and played really well from start to finish. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue to carry that momentum on through the Big 12 championship game. And if they can and get a win against K-State, can they carry that type of momentum into the college football playoff? I mean, if they play like they did against Iowa State, I think, they've got talent enough to play in that playoff and be competitive in that playoff. TCU just hasn't played like that most of the year. Most of the year, they're kind of getting by the skin of their teeth. So those are some notables. Championship games are now set. Big 12, you got TCU and Kansas State. That one's an interesting one because K-State had a really big lead on TCU before some injuries hit in that game. And then obviously TCU came back. It's tough to beat the same team twice in one season. We'll see. Pack, USC and Utah, a rematch of USC's only loss. Again, tough to beat the same team twice. I think Utah certainly can. USC's looking pretty good, man. Offensively, Caleb Williams is he's a video game. That dude, he's just amazing to watch. To me, he's like the most impactful quarterback. And I mean, just his ability to just make plays since Vince Young with his legs, like just improvisation, just the way he can take a completely broken down play, run around and nobody can touch him almost like he's on a cheat code on a video game. And then what really sets him apart to me is his accuracy on the run and how far down the field he can put a ball accurately on the run. They're going to be tough, man. And if they get into the playoff, they're going to be tough. And I'm not saying I'm predicting some crazy USC national championship, but I think their defense is pretty weak. But man, offensively, they're going to be a tough one to get through. Big Ten, Michigan, and Purdue. I think Purdue ended up winning their game. I guess I should have researched that. I'm pretty sure it was Purdue. They were up big. It doesn't matter. I said last week it won't matter. I don't think anybody's going to even watch that game. I'll watch it just because it's, one of the last college football games of the year, but I don't think anybody really cares. Michigan should steamroll whoever they're playing. ACC, regardless of the losses, both teams lost. Clemson lost and North Carolina lost. Who can get up? Who can get up and go win a game after some disappointing losses, I guess, is the theme of that one. And then SEC, Georgia and LSU. The only chance LSU has in this game is Georgia watching A&M just absolutely trounce LSU and thinking to themselves, this isn't going to be a hard game at all. So there's the championship game picture. Let's talk about the games we did predictions on last week. Michigan, Ohio State. I thought the keys to the game for this one were who can establish the run, which defense can make some big plays in the passing game. I don't think either team really established the run early on, but Michigan stuck with it. And after hitting some really big plays over the top early in the game, they were able to really turn the running game on late, just really bury Ohio State. So I think the keys to the game kind of rang true. They were the better running team, and they did the opposite of Ohio State and gave up a ton of big plays through the air. I don't think either defense really made a lot of big plays in the passing game, but certainly Ohio State's defense did the opposite of that and gave up a lot of really big pass plays. I had this one 31-24, Michigan. 45-23 was the score. KU and K-State. Texas needed a KU victory. I said we wouldn't see it this time, and we didn't. I think for the most part, K-State dominated that game throughout. Even though the score was somewhat close for the majority of the game, it definitely got away from KU at the end. I had K-State big 45-21. Ended up being 47-27. Baylor at Texas. Keys to the game for this one were to continue to stop the run for Texas. I thought they did a really good job of that. I said they needed to lean on the running game early and often, and they didn't really do that. They ended up really leaning on the running game. We'll talk about that in a minute. But early, Sark still wanted to sort of feature Ewers, which is just, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think you got to sideline the guy, but I don't think you make the redshirt freshman quarterback that's obviously struggled sort of the center of the whole thing. And for whatever reason, Sark just continues to want him to do that. I talked about Ewers going to have to make some plays through the air, and I think he did. I think Ewers had a decent game. He completed over 70% of his passes. He had the bad start. He threw the ball away, gave up the safety, fumbled the ball, which that play really wasn't his fault. I was more mad at Sark for running the ball, passing the ball than I was at Quinn Ewers for giving up that scoop and score. But he did have some nice balls in that game. I thought, the pass to Whittingham that he fumbled was a really good ball. So I thought Ewers played well. Predictions on this one, I talked about the running game might be slowed down a little bit, but not completely stopped. And early on, that was the case. There was no explosive play. I think what Sark does is if the running game is not explosive, he sees that negatively and wants to start creating explosive plays through the air. And that's Sark's deal. He wants to create explosive plays. And I get that. The more explosive plays you can make offensively, obviously the much better chance you have to win football games. I just think he sees success in the running game differently than almost anybody else. So it was slow, but they were still averaging over 4 yards a carry in the first half. Bijan Robinson was. I said I think Ewers will get his confidence back, and I think he did. He might not have got his confidence back because of those two negative plays, but outside of those negative plays, which again, they were bad plays, not his finest moments, definitely freshman type mistakes. And really the fumble was just kind of a good play by Baylor's defense. He rolled away from the pressure that came because nobody blocked anybody on the right side of the offensive line. And he just happened to roll right into the defensive end who was, making a good pass rush. So not 100% Ewers' fault there. I mean, hold on to the ball, obviously, but I think outside of that, he played really well. So I hope he got his confidence back. I mean, it wasn't an amazing performance, but it was good enough, right? And actually, his numbers were kind of exactly what I thought about. I said anything north of 65% completions and somewhere around 200 yards. I did throw in a couple touchdowns, which he didn't get. He did get one on the ground. But compared to the last few games, that was a bounce back type game for Ewers. I said Texas will win this game 38-20. They won it 38-27, and the difference in me missing on that one was that scoop and score. So pretty close on that one too. My final thoughts on this game. Really, I thought the first half, and I'm going to go into, these are going to be some negative things to start out, and then I'll get into some more of the positive. I thought the first half pass defense was really rough. They gave up too many big plays in the passing game. I talked last week about this bunch alignment that Sark likes to do. He likes to bring in Carrick, which is really an offensive lineman that's wearing a tight end number. He brings this guy in, and then not only does he do that, but then he bunches all the wide receivers really close to the football. And when you do that, you make it really hard to know where pressure's coming from. And you make it really easy for the defense to just kind of, by alignment, load up the box. You create all this traffic in the running game. Whereas if you would spread the field, the defense has to tip its hat about what it's doing from a pressure perspective. And you just by alignment, you get people out of Bijan Robinson's way or whoever's back there. But for whatever reason, he loves this bunch alignment, and it cost him on that safety, on that intentional grounding. Ewers had no idea where the pressure was coming from. I would like to see Sark go away from that. I get it, man. Like, you want to put body on a body. And if you can successfully put a body on a body, you really only have to get 2 or 3 yards before you're in the clear. I just think with a guy like Bijan that can make people miss in the open space like he can, you put a hat on that defensive line with everybody else spread out. I almost feel like you could get like 5, 6, 7 yards of carry just by spreading things out. He's not going to ever go away from it. It's what he wants to do. I hate it. It is what it is. Pre-snap penalties again got Texas. I think they had 3 false starts in the game. At least 2 of them were on the same guy. I'm pretty sure all 3 of them were. Got to figure out a way to cut that out. And Baylor got called later on in the game for, what do they get called for? Delay a game, which is something you rarely see in football, especially on the defense. But they got called for delay of game, sort of simulating the snap count. I wonder if they were doing that early, and that's what got Hayden Connor. Don't know. Just an interesting thought. This is the worst thing about this game for me, this next part. 7 touches for Bijan in the first half. Again, I think Sark saw 7. He didn't see anything explosive. He saw the negative side of 7 for 29 yards. When a lot of people would go, hey, if I give this guy the ball, he's going to get over 4 yards. If he does that twice, I've got 3rd and short. If I keep giving him the ball more and more, he's just going to get better and better. I think Sark has some experience, obviously, as a head coach. He doesn't have a lot of experience with great success as a head coach. He's going to have to, I think, kind of change his mindset, especially towards the running game, if he wants to really be successful. If he wants to be in that playoff picture, he's going to have to adjust his expectations for the running game. All right, so let's talk about some good stuff in that game. The drive after Baylor's missed field goal was huge. They went down the field. They scored a touchdown. They took the lead. Really big answer. That's what good teams do. When the other team makes a mistake, they figure out a way to go make them pay for that mistake. And Texas was able to do that. And I thought that was big. Texas had a lot of momentum at the beginning of that game. Once they got past the very first series, they stormed back and took the lead. And then Baylor sort of snatched it back right before the end of the half to actually go in with a halftime lead, which was something that I think outside of Bama, I don't think Texas has trailed at half at all this season. So it was kind of a different place for them. So for them to be able to sort of bounce back from that and then take a mistake and turn it around on Baylor, I thought was huge. I thought the drive after the scoop and score by Baylor was a huge pivotal moment, obviously, in that game. And to me, there's no surprise that the game ended the way it did because Sark absolutely said, he just ditched the passing game. They ran the ball 22 straight times after that scoop and score over 3 different drives. During the process of those drives, just physically dominating Baylor's front 6 or 7. Defense was able to get a big sack. One of the things the defense didn't really do a great job of in the first half was get any kind of pressure on Shapen. But they did end up getting a big sack there. And then immediately following that, Jalen Ford picks off his 4th pass of the season. Jalen Ford, man, you talk about a guy coming almost out of nowhere. He didn't get a lot of play last year. He played behind Brockermeyer for the majority of the season last year. Man, 4 interceptions, leads the team. I think he's got to be in the discussion for Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. He led the team in tackles. He's got to be up there in the Big 12 in tackles. He's close to 100, maybe even over 100 tackles this year. Just a really active guy. A lot of the talk this season was Overshown. Man, I think Jalen Ford is just completely blown right past Overshown in terms of just his impact on the game. Speaking of that defense, they pitched the shutout in the second half. Huge. We talked about it earlier. Texas not really used to being behind at halftime. What they have kind of done a lot this year is be ahead at halftime, and then the defense just wasn't able to continue to pitch those shutouts and get those stops. They did it big time against Baylor. And then the last thought for the game is just, again, Sark in the running game. I feel like his expectation of success is going to have to change. I think in the entire season, he's underutilized the running game. I think it cost him against Oklahoma State. I think it cost him against TCU. Could have cost him in that Tech game as well. The interesting thing about his just completely going away from the running game, outside of the fact that he's got a freshman quarterback that's just, hasn't played well the last half of the season, really since coming back from his injury. I know he had the huge game against OU, and I don't know what that's about. It's not like he was just throwing to wide open guys. He was making good reads and putting the ball where it needed to be put. And he looked amazing in that game. And I don't know what's happened to him, if it's a mental thing. It's got to be a mental thing. I think physically he's fine. But again, the interesting thing is Sark would rather have that guy continue to try to win you games than handing it off to the 2 NFL running backs. And the offensive line is, they've had their struggles. They're young. But over time, if you consistently lean on people, they get tired. Who knows what happens in that TCU game if Sark just says, you know what, we're going to run the football. And it's going to pay off in the 4th quarter. Maybe they figure out a way to, maybe they bust one like TCU did. TCU kept running the ball in that game, and they finally busted one. And one is all it takes in a close game like that. So again, I know Sark's philosophy, but the the other thing that's interesting is when he came to Texas, he talked about we're going to be a running team. We want to be a running team first so we can set up over the top. And this year it's really been a lot of we're going to go over the top and we'll sprinkle in some Bijan and Roshan. So I really think he's got to change his mindset on that. If he doesn't adjust to that, I feel like we're going to see a lot of the same. I think it's just unfair, especially to a guy like Quinn Ewers that doesn't have a ton of experience, to just continue to expect that guy to be able to win you the game. Puts pressure on everybody. Puts pressure on the offensive line. It puts pressure on the wide receivers. I don't know. We'll see. Bowl game should be interesting for them. It looks like they're more than likely going to be in the Cheez-It Bowl or the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. Possibility of some pretty decent matchups if they go to either one of those two. I don't see how they go anywhere else besides those two. Officials in football are still really bad. Something I noticed this weekend that just completely pissed me off, and it happened in the Texas game. There was a play where we got down to like the inch line or something, and it looked like maybe he scored, maybe he didn't. Okay. They called him down on the field, which is fine. I wasn't even mad. I wasn't even mad about the play. But why does it always take the officiating crew the entire amount of time it takes to set the ball, both teams to get in the huddle, both teams to substitute, both teams to get their plays in, get lined up, and then literally snap the ball for the next play before they blow the whistle and say, oh, we want to review that? Why does it take that amount of time? It's absurd. Like, officials have got to be better. You completely kill all momentum when you do that. Not only that, but Texas easily punched it in on that play. And they easily punched it in the very next play. That's not the point. The point is you stop a play as the play is happening when there was multiple seconds before that for you to decide, I need to review that. If it takes you more than a couple of glances to go, I don't know for sure what happened on that play, you need to review it. And you don't need to wait until all of that other shit has happened before you decide to review it. Missed face masks in the FSU game, Florida State game, just completely absurd. I don't know how you can be watching the play that's happening and miss two face masks. And I've seen a lot of missed face masks this year, and I don't see how. People's heads don't do this for no reason. Their heads don't fly around abruptly for no reason. But we've seen a ton. Texas has had a few this year, and not just Texas, multiple teams. There was the two that Florida had. Florida State committed on the very last play of the game. I'm not saying who knows if Florida scores. It's not the point. I'm all for officials sort of taking the back seat in the game. I don't want the officials to be a part of the game the way some officiating crews are a part of the game, but you have to call penalties that are obvious penalties. So many obvious holding calls just absolutely do not get called. For those of you that know, well, for those of you that don't know, I hate officials. I think officiating is so bad in sports today. It's crazy. Fuck you, officials. All right, y'all, subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. Video of the podcast will be up on YouTube. You can find me on TikTok at Horn Takes Podcast. YouTube is Horn Takes Podcast. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms. I'd love to hear them. Y'all have a good one. Hook 'em.